Good afternoon, everybody, and you're very welcome. So before I introduce the panel, firstly, I'd like to thank you for coming and dedicating this 60 minutes to talk about open access. If I was to go around the room here and ask what your view of open access was and understanding, and I'm not going to today, I think I'd probably get an awful lot of different opinions. For those of you who don't follow the FDH Council, I am Niall Halpenny. I chair the Open Access Committee within the Fibre to Home Council. And last year, we actually published a white paper. And that white paper set out 5 principles of open access. Now, it took us about 18 months to get 5 principles down. Since then, we've seen an awful lot of interest. We've been contacted between national agencies, people asking, yeah, look, that seems to be a framework we're really interested in. We've also started moving on, and we're going to produce a positioning paper, again, which will expand on those 5 principles. But what I would say is if anybody here thinks wholesale and open access are the same, they're not. Because open access didn't exist back in the days of a single incumbent. So what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to shortly introduce the panel, is the world of open access. And it's evolving. It's evolving very fast, as business models are, as technology is. So hopefully, at the end of the day, at the end of today, you'll have a better concept or a different concept of what open access is, why it's important, and how broad it spans. So with me today, and I'm going to ask my panelists to come up, we've got Marta. And these will all introduce themselves in a second. Hervé. Christian. And Simon. So we're going to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, give an overview of their perspective, where they're coming from, and then we're going to go to an interactive session. And hopefully at time we take a few questions at the end. So, Marta, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here once again. I must say this is my 5th time during this conference, so I'm really happy for you asking to join me once again. I'm Marta Wojciechowska. I'm the CEO of FibreHost. FibreHost, this is Polish wholesale-only open access network in Poland. We operate currently 1.4 million HPs, purely FTTH. And just shortly for this introduction part, I would like to present you a little bit history, very quickly, history of Polish telecommunication market through FibreHost lenses. And this is because our history, FibreHost history, really suits how the market evolved. So basically, we started as an integrated operator 30 years ago. And in 2017, we decided to focus on wholesale and decided to open our networks, which was not the case. In 2021, so 5 years ago, we closed the formal and legal merger. We put aside our service provider and focused as FibreHost on open access and wholesale. And I must tell you that back then, the market was completely different. Basically, open access was just a concept. And back then, 5 years ago, we were focusing on building the network very fast and building the market, the open access concept from the scratch. Fast forward today, as you can see, 83% of coverage with FTTH in Poland. So I would say this was not evolution. It was like an amazing, civilizational leap, I would say. Because we are today at this position that the coverage is almost, let's say, whole Poland. And what's important, the situation on the market has changed. open access is not a concept anymore. This is a functioning reality in Poland. We've got stable rules, predictable rules, the possibility to indexation, and the whole ecosystem is working. So right now, we are at this turning point. I hope that we will be discussing it in a moment. And we are focusing more on utilization of what was built. We are focusing on working on technology. Hope we will be talking about Fibre, about FTTH, because I believe that this is the only generational technology, future-proof technology. And I'm really glad that today, during the first panels, we were talking a lot about copper switch-off, but I would also like to bring your attention to HFC, which is not fiber, and we need to start talking about also switching off HFC, as this is not a sustainable technology. So just closing this part, I would say that looking at this 5 years ago today and the future, we are in the position that the era of building is over, is ending. And now we are entering this phase of making the use of what we've built in the most sustainable way for the economy, for the society, and for the use in the future. So I'm very eager to today's discussion and hope you will enjoy it as well.
Thank you, Marta. Marta, if you wouldn't mind passing that to Hervé. And Hervé, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Hervé Dubreuil. I work in Orange. I am infrastructure director in wholesale division. So, in 2023, you know, in Orange, we launched our strategic plan, which was called Lead the Future. And in Lead the Future, a key point was a very important point was to become and be recognized as an infrastructure leader. So it means 2 points. First, keep assets. So in Orange, we did a little carve-out or almost no carve-out. And the second point, it was to develop new assets. So every kind of assets with different mechanisms on balance sheet by joint venture, co-build, fiber co. So we use public subsidies. So we try every model, we can say. And 3 years later, we can say, well positioned in all assets to be used for retail and wholesale. We are recognized as strong infra players and key assets for the business. And as you may know, in last February, our CEO, Christel Edeman, just launched the new strategic plan, which is Trust the Future. And as you see on the slide, there are 3 pillars in the Trust the Future, but the main pillars to talk today is innovative growth. And today, in innovative growth, our target is to monetize all infrastructure and share all infrastructure, increase occupancy rate on retail and wholesale. So it means for FTTH, of course, increase this occupancy rate in every market. And we are a company that comes from retail, as you may know, an incumbent. We learned in France how to be a wholesaler on copper and also on fiber. We learned also to be a whole buyer. And today, we have developed this model in every market. So to summarize, the objective is to be a more open operator with the ability to develop all ecosystem, and so there is a clear connection with the open access model. And just to conclude, we live, you know, in different market with different regulatory market framework. So I think we will discuss this point because we need to adapt to this different context.
Thank you, Harry. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Christian Freisleben, and I am the Managing Director of OpenNet GmbH. That would be our German branch. OpenNet is an open access platform, and we originate from Denmark. In Denmark, we are the market leader and have been operating open access for all the ISPs and a vast majority of the FTTH footprint since 2019. We went operative. We were established back in 2017. A couple of years ago, we decided to enter Germany. At the same time, there was a very strong pull effect. There was, in fact, a strong demand on open access from the German market as well. And today, we are operative in northern Germany. We run about 100 individual relations between service providers and network operators. Our core deliverable is to give value to the network operators and the network owners to secure as much traffic to their network as possible. And that is, in effect, to bring as many ISPs to the network as possible. So in reality, we foster a dynamic ISP marketplace. Such a marketplace cannot exist without a true non-discriminatory setup and a true non-discriminatory acceptance from the infrastructure operator. So partners to our platform on the operator side, they acknowledge to be completely non-discriminatory, even for the ones who come from an integrated position where they have their own ISP. So we also worked with the FTTH Council over the past couple of years and with Niall to give input for the true open access guidelines. So constantly we seek to comply to the guidelines from the FTTH Council. Today we strive to grow in the German market as well. And I think this is also some of the talking points later in this panel here. What are the differences between the Danish and the German market? But we see quite a big growth potential in the German market. Thank you. Okay. So, Simon, to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simon Rosas. I run CVC DIF's digital infrastructure investment business in Europe. For those that don't know, CVC DIF is originally a Dutch-based infrastructure manager focusing on the mid-market globally, but with very strong European roots. Started out as Schiphol about 20 years ago. Today we manage about 20 billion of investment across various infrastructure verticals, again globally, but with a lot of focus on the European markets. We're now part of CVC, we're CVC's investment arm, so the headquarters have somewhat shifted to London from that perspective, and I'm based here in London, although travel regularly. I think the interesting thing from my position as head of digital infrastructure in Europe is that neither things really exist. Digital infrastructure is a kind of thing that combines fiber and data centers and towers, each of which behave in a very different manner. And then the European fiber market also in some ways doesn't exist, as my panelists have clearly already indicated. Each market is very particular in the way it's been set up because of its history and other reasons. I'll go in a bit more detail around what that means from an investment perspective. I think our focus on digital infrastructure, and we are investors today in a number of fiber platforms going from Canada and the US and across a lot of the European markets, a few of them in France, one fast-growing one in Finland, UK, Germany, and we're looking at some of the other situations as well in the meantime. What I would say is an important distinction for us is that we try and find digital infrastructure assets in fiber, which means that they should be not competing with other potential alternatives on the same footprint. That by itself normally leads you towards looking at open access arrangements where you hope not to get any kind of overbuild, and open access is a good way of trying to manage that overbuild. But our view of what that implies and what that means has also shifted over time, and I'm looking really forward today to discuss how that view has changed, why it has changed, and where are we landing at this moment as the markets are maturing more in that direction.
Thank you,
And with
Simon.
that, maybe I'll hand back to Neil.
Yeah, actually, I want to take up on your last point there first, Simon, and I want to go get the panelist view. So if we're sitting here, 2026, 2020 was COVID. So let's say we're back to work, 2021. There was a view of the world, how we were all looking then. We're sitting here, 2026. What's the view, 2021 versus 2031? Simon, if you wouldn't mind starting from an investment perspective, where were we 5 years ago? Where are we now? And where could we like to pitch in 5 years' time?
So from an investor perspective, if I looked at the way that we looked at the world at the time, the view is effectively that the world is going to be rational and we will all land into some correct way of, rolling out these fiber networks and optimizing and rationalizing how they are commercialized. And so at the time, I would say, even if we accepted that in some cases we will have a fully vertically integrated fiber network, over time what you ought to do is build a bit of a position and then open up and you sort of make it the platform for everybody else, all the providers, all the customers to access the service through your single, owned platform, that way avoiding all the overbuild. That was the purest view. We developed a lot of the platforms with that view. But I would say that the very distinct lesson that everyone has learned is don't take something that works somewhere else and you think is fairly rationally built and try and impose that on a different market that for whatever reason is resisting that dynamic. And so as a result, what we see, I think, today is very clearly the markets have differentiated amongst the ones where certainly the wholesale and in many ways the open access functions reasonably well. We are investors in some of the lower density pins, as they're called in France, where this has been set up centrally. It's an ecosystem that functions very well, that everybody likes and understands how that works. I would argue, something similar exists in Poland that Martha was referring to, in other different ways. Denmark and Sweden are probably also operating in a similar way in certain areas. Portugal perhaps as well. In some other markets like UK and Germany, very clearly, while the wholesale concept has been developed, what we do see is a lot of the kind of captive wholesale where realistically speaking, this is a platform that's really been built for one particular ISP, and then maybe it manages to add a second or third ISP, but the standards are very fragmented, and there are implications both commercial and technical about the ease by which you can actually get into those various structures. So one thing that I would say we've really learned the hard way is don't push your ideal view onto the market, see what the market does and evolve with the market. And I would say that's probably the key guidance that we see today. It doesn't make reaching that ideal easier, but we do our best. We don't try to reach the ideal position, let's put it that way.
Thanks. And Christian, I'd be very interested to hear your view, where Denmark was, say, 5-10 years ago. You took a leap of faith to go south of Flensburg. Mm-hmm. Tell us what you found.
Well, we gained a lot of experience from the Danish market, and I would say also the Danish team has very high level of competence, understanding the wholesale, the whole buy concept, and how to foster the dynamics. So we work from the premises that an infrastructure operator wants as many ISPs on their network as possible, but it can only work if you work with a very solid standardized processual structure. You cannot have 10 different ways of working with 10 different ISPs, because then you would kill yourself in complexity. So we took the model that we know from the Danish market, which essentially means that all workflows are completely consistent, even though they come from different orders from different ISPs in one particular network. Also, the network operates and engage with the ISPs in the same way that as the neighboring network. So that core concept, we stepped into the German market in Schleswig-Holstein, and we had, as I said before, actually quite a heavy request, mainly due to the threat of overbuild from the Deutsche Telekom, to be honest. So among Stadtwerke segment, there was a general fear that the Deutsche Telekom would roll out the fiber with a very strong ISP brand, the Magenta brand. So we set up more or less the same scenario, but it's not necessarily that easy to step across the border. And we found that it's an emerging market, so to speak, within open access in Germany. So there's a, I think, well, it would be rude to say it's immature, but the Danish wholesale, whole-buy, and open access market is extremely mature. Everybody is open with everybody. But in Germany, you see these often one-on-one or maybe a few relations to one ISP, but there's no common standard. There's no common ways of working. Maybe in some areas there is. And then also north versus southern Germany. So it appears to us in the northern part of Germany, there's a stronger urge to work with open access and to give away your own brand and make room for other brands to grow net uptake, essentially.
I think it's worth as well, maybe for the audience, to give an overview of the level of overbuild in Denmark. I mean, in Denmark, overbuild is not an issue.
We don't have that much overbuild in Denmark, but of course, MDUs and new build and so forth, you see double cabling. But we do have quite a lot of coax network, and I think the HFC network in Denmark is at least it challenges the FTTH owners because it's an open coax or open HFC network, and the wholesale pricing on the HFC network is substantially lower than on the fiber part. However, we can still see that now there's a decline in the uptake on the HFC. One thing is that they convert the network into fiber, but also there's continuously a growing net uptake on the FTTH network.
And Hervé, I mean, I'd like to get your perspective. You're sitting, a French company that has internationalized quite well. You have a view of. And for anyone in the audience, I did work for Orange, by the way. So it was, great company. But if you could give a view from your perspective of the different markets, the market differences across Europe, and how you, as a big, Orange are a big entity. How did you have to adjust your strategies across the different markets?
Yes. Maybe I will go one step further. I will start with 10 years ago.
Yes, please.
If I may. So, in France, we have a clear regulatory framework with 3 areas: dense area, mid-dense areas, and rural areas. In rural areas, the French model is based on public subsidies and public tenders. Initially, in Orange, we were quite reluctant, we can say, to participate in this initiative. We were copper-oriented, and we tried to increase the copper throughput and to leverage this network. But in 2016, there was a switch in the company. We decided to be part of the in these public tenders and to cover the rural areas. And I think it was a very good decision for the company and for France. For the company, it allows to test a different model. So we were building the network for other people, for local authorities, on behalf of local authorities. We were managing the network for them. And then we learn how to sell the network, to be a wholesaler, to work in an open model, to try to have different customers, different ISPs in open model, which is quite important. And so with it allows us to anticipate also the loss of the copper wholesale revenue, which is happening now. And the second point is also there was the risk if we would not be part of this public tender to be out of the fiber market in these rural areas. So it was a good decision for the company. Now we have a good market share in this market. And to answer your question, I think we learn a lot from this experience, and we are quite open now to work with different models. Maybe I can anticipate on the HFC point of view. In Spain, we are one point. You are perfectly right, Marta, is to ask the question if with an old infrastructure like HFC model, shouldn't we dismantle this kind of infrastructure and switch to fiber? It's not so easy. We have customer, we have revenues and companies. So we need to have a transition model. And maybe what we, as an example, we could talk about a joint venture in Spain between MasOrange and Vodafone Zegona, which is a joint venture between a fiber-centric company and a HFC-centric company. And the objective of this joint venture was to create the condition, the balance condition between, and the financial condition between the two companies to make sure that we could migrate the customer in a seamless way and to guarantee, an economical viability for the two companies. So yeah, it's an example of what we can test in different countries. Maybe
No, that's great, and some of the nice points that Hervé that I like is like, as an incumbent, you made a strategic decision to go pure, proper open access, and that those who stuck with that, who fight that model, are destined to stick with copper longer. I think it's, Mart, I want to pick up on a similar point. In Poland, HFC is a big issue. Well, I say issue, it's a embedded technology. So if you can give us an overview of that, and also your view of the path to 50G, because my understanding is Poland now, it's 5 gigabit offers in the market are quite common.
Yeah.
So we've gone from we have fiber homes passed, and that's what we, the FTTH Council, will always look at as kind of our base metric. But behind that now, many markets are offering multiple of 1 gig products to the retail. So can you give us a view, HFC, the roadmap, 50G, Poland?
I will start with what Simon finished about the evolution that the market is evolving. I would say that we in Poland are maybe different kind of people. We are not waiting for the evolution. We are taking, the work with our hands, and we are shaping. And that's exactly what we've done for the last 5 years. Open concept then was non-existent, and we were focusing on providing this regulatory frame, which eventually we did, and we managed to put all the blocks into the framework. We've got stable regulations. We know how to wholesale price, looks, indexation, and most importantly, we can introduce changes on a regular basis without opening the contracts. And no one believed that it would be possible. It is right now. So I believe that this is why we are now mature market, and we are doing it. As to HFC, I know that it's not easy. In Poland, indeed, there's a lot of HFC and copper. With copper, we all agree that it needs to disappear as soon as possible. But I believe that also this refers to HFC. We at Fibre Host decided a couple of years ago that we are modernizing our HFC. We will be switching off this technology by the end of 27. So already for several, well, maybe not several years, but 2-3 years, we have this project of converting the clients from migrating the clients from HFC to FTTH. It's difficult, but it's doable, and you need to be persistent with that. And I can tell you that it is bringing a good result. And also, as to the HFC, because this is a very hot topic right now in Poland, because there are operators that have a lot of HFC. They are opening the HFC, and they are claiming that this is FTTH, so putting all these big numbers that we've got several millions of homes passed in FTTH. Most of them is HFC. And, of course, we all do understand PR and everything, but we are at FTTH conference, and I'm in this company for quite a long, and for me, FTTH, this is the only solution and the only infrastructure that will be in use for many years, for generations. And as we are looking at all those technologies that, well, will achieve the limits sooner or later, and as you're looking how they are changing and how they are upgrading. So basically, to upgrade copper or HFC to make some improvements, you do shorten actually the old cables and replace them with fiber. So what does it mean? It means that in fixed world, in fixed technologies, only FTTH will survive. And I believe that this is something that we also need to be very vocal, that the decision to go with full fiber FTTH is crucial for the next years. So this is for HFC. I know that we may have some controversies in a moment, Hervé, but but okay. And also about the last part of your question was about 5G.
50G.
Yeah.
See the same as same.
Yeah. Basically, as we are looking at our market right now, in Poland, 1 gigabit, this is like the hero pack, the speed that is used. And maybe it is sufficient, you would say, but I think that as an industry, we need to be ready for what is to come. And, you know, with all this AI bubble that is going on, and for sure will be accelerating, and all those things that will provoke higher speeds, we need to start to get ready for that. And in FiberHost, we are already moving from GPON to XGS-PON.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of our network is in GPON, and now we know that the next step, and the step that we are doing right now, is upgrading to XGS-PON, which we are doing. We are basically, in July, we'll be introducing new speeds to 5 and 8. And someone would say that it's too early because market is not ready. And I believe that this is in our hands, and we need to show to the market that this is something that needs to be done and that we will be doing in the future.
I mean, just as if anyone was in the open access workshop yesterday, Alanta, who are an open access operator in Spain, they have a live 50G site, 50. Yeah. They're using it in a football stadium, so they're saying it's no longer a lab.
Yeah.
And the point we see is that we're here in Europe. If we're going to say 1 gig is, you know, that's fine, you have fiber, you 1 gig. They're not saying that in Singapore, Korea, or
exactly.
Japan. Simon, I want to go back to you because as an investor, to get your perspective across the market. So we're talking about a path to 50G here, a land to 50G. There are countries like Germany who can't even see a path to 90% fiber yet. So from an investor perspective, can you give us a view of the different markets, where you see them operating, and, you know, what's, from an investor's perspective, would you like to see, you know? And any differences in those markets that make them favorable or, you know, would cause you to say, nah, pass?
Look, I think the issue is we can put any numbers we want, whether it's 1 or 50. What is it for, and how how can you sell it to the customer ultimately? Yeah. I think the real challenge for incumbents like Orange, but also for the challengers that own some HFC assets is, your finance department is looking at the proposition of investing a lot of money to convert from sort of A to B, to get exactly the same revenue that they were getting in the first place, right? And so obviously when you ask when is the right time to do it, the CFO's answer is not under my watch. So there is this inherent challenge in when is it the right thing to upgrade and what are you upgrading for? We haven't yet seen the killer application that is pushing that demand from, we've seen it actually, I would argue, from mobile to a fiber need. And if we look at the Finnish market, which was primarily mobile-based, we can thank a certain virus that spread a few years ago by locking people in their homes. And when you're watching ice hockey and doing a conference call, and your child is, has a life or death experience playing a computer game, you do need that. You can tell the mobile coverage is not enough. The mobile speed is not enough. You need that fiber connection. Now, do you need 1 gig today? Frankly, probably not for most of the use, as long as you got a stable connection at a lower speed that works. I think for us, really, the speeds are more of a marketing trick today. How do you convert people quicker? How do you attract them quicker? It's really, I would say, we would let the market comment, so to speak, on how quickly you deploy that capital and how quickly you change it. Like if, again, on the equipment side, if at the same cost you can deploy something that's more future-proof, so to speak, why not do it? But we're not looking at speeds. I think what we're looking at is, in each market, how do you productize that speed and how do you sell it in each market and how does that become attractive to someone? But from our perspective, spending investment money just to retain what you already have is a very difficult proposition. And I think we're seeing that as an issue across the market.
And do you look at trends in take-up and ARPU, Simon, when you're looking at markets?
I mean, daily. Daily. I mean, that is basically all we look at. And I think, again, we go back, Hervé went back 10 years, you can go back 100 years. You look at some of the anthropology of how things have happened, again, going back to the Finland market where I spent a lot of time, it's literally the single telephone exchanges that were corporatized 100 years ago and built. That market structure has evolved somewhat, but it still goes back to that traditional route. The question whether the copper was upgraded into VDSL in the UK and Germany happens to haunt us today because it's harder to transfer to fiber versus a market like France where that hasn't happened to the same extent, right? Interestingly, there isn't much cable in the ground in Italy, and yet the fiber market hasn't grown to the extent that you were hoping to grow. But for us, really, those few parameters that you mentioned, they really, it's theoretically a very simple business. It's amazing how difficult it actually is when you try and drill into it and you try and predict what the take-up and the ability to pay is going to be. Fundamental issue for us, and I compare North America to Europe, is that, and I keep saying this, but I don't think it'll change much. We have convinced ourselves in Europe through competition, through looking out for customer interest and so on, that a customer can spend a few €100 a month on their gas coming from various parts of the world, but spending more than one lunch on their vital connectivity is a crime. Our North American cousins spend $100 without blinking. Now, what does that mean? We do get, a good deal for customers from a price perspective, correct? But the speed to market, the quality of the networks that are being installed, I think that all is probably taking a bit of a, timing and quality effect over time.
I mean, an interesting one, Christian, I would like to hear your view on this because as OpenNet, the customer view, they're all talking about the customer view, but there has to be a viability view and a sustainable view for these business models. But I mean, in Denmark, you have a very high penetration. Your platform was meant to help with standards to, enhance that customer onboarding experience. Do you think it is a generator of value? The having happy customers, and what angle, what percentage does it pay, or is it just price?
So, and
the customer view, is it more the customer satisfaction view, the onboarding, via an ISP, or is it purely price?
I think the market we see in Denmark, we have challenger brands. They focus on high speed, value for money, but they also focus on a very good customer experience. So, extremely efficient customer service. And then we have the premium brands that do a lot of bundling. And they are able to take to have a premium price, and the fiber price becomes less important in these issues. But I think that the point here is that you have many ISPs fighting over each other and the same customer base.
Yep.
So in the end, it's not just about internet. You see a mix or a variety of services offered for the customer. And I would argue that fosters innovation and potential new types of or bundled services for the customer, even cross-bundle to other types of services as well.
We did this, if I may, we did this survey within FibreHost. What's this crucial for the end customers? Obviously, we do not have direct contact with the end customers, but we did this survey to verify why the people are not using fiber if they do have this possibility. And basically, price was not the matter. Price was not the crucial thing. The crucial thing was the awareness of people and their needs. As Simon said, this is important. What are the needs of people? And we noticed that people said, I don't need it. I do have my, mobile or my cell phone, and this is enough. But once we showed them what are the possibilities, what can be done, at first they were trying, and then they never leave fiber, our network. So in Poland, we do see that the customer experience is very important. And of course, for the end customer, it doesn't matter whether this is fiber or whatever, but they do appreciate the overall experience and the stability and low latency and all these things. You would think that it's not important for the people, for the normal end consumers, but it does more than the price.
So that's probably what Simon was saying as well with the mobile. It's not.
Yeah.
I think Hervé, I'll ask your question in a second, but to me, there's always a problem in the market when somebody has a price out on the market, be it for FWA, and then you're trying to recoup a price for fiber. It's not like for like. You've had your HFC in the ground for 40 years.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Hervé, you were about to come in.
Yeah. Just one point, jumping to the Marta remark. There is also the question of the Wi-Fi connectivity.
Oh, yeah.
Because
that's crucial.
We sell very high broadband connectivity, but if the Wi-Fi is not good, then the end user will not be happy. So that's the job of the retailer, and we need to have a good Wi-Fi connectivity. There are also other points that are very important to ease the ISP life and to ease the end user life. For example, is to reuse existing drop cables. If you don't have a clear framework where all ISPs are obliged to reuse the drop cable when it exists, you can have bad situation with each in case of churn. The new ISP will have the new drop cable, and it will be inefficiency, money loss, and the end user unsatisfaction. So there are some quick win. For me, it's not complicated. It's a quick win to have a kind of common database with all the players, the infrastructure players and the ISPs, to have this common database of existing drop cable and create the financial condition to support this.
Yeah. Sorry, Christian, you want to come in there?
Yeah, that was regarding the mobile broadband. So I wouldn't rule that out as a competitor towards even fiber. Like in the Danish market, we have 3 with high capacity mobile networks, and they are well developed on 5G. And that means that they do some really good consumer offerings in fairly or high competitive environment as well. And they are actually able to capture some of the potential FTTH customers. So it is a factor to count in.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a net uptake of about 60%, and we are more than 90% built out.
Yeah.
So why don't we raise from 60 to 80 like we see in other Scandinavian countries? I think the one thing is the HFC network that we discussed before, but I think mobile is also a factor to count in here.
And I think in Finland, you will see that even a bigger gap, because Finland, mobile was such a huge penetration there. But I mean, what you've just spoken there about is interesting, Christian, because you're saying in a market with no overbuild, you're seeing a ceiling of about 60%, because you got 40% in alternative technologies. But as the race goes to 50G, and as those speeds do go up, can you see the others keeping pace at that stage, or did it just become a fringe offering?
Well, I will expect a migration to fiber, of course, over time, for sure. But
So
I mean, right now, it's the average speed, like 2/3 of the consumers in Denmark, they have above 300 megabits.
Yeah.
So it's not like they are, like everybody is above 1 gig but eventually, of course.
I mean, again, one note I've seen in some countries, and Italy being one of them, is a lot of people have holiday homes. And therefore, a holiday home, people will generally bring a mobile dongle. They're not interested in a 12-month contract. They're there for 6 weeks. Same in the UK. Same in most countries. You have the holiday areas. And yet, as a fibre provider, do you see that, Marta, as well?
I'm really pleased that we are talking about, the customer experience, because I believe that it proves what I said before, that, the era of building is a little bit behind. We will not be discussing it as much. And now we need to talk about the utilization. And for that, customer experience is crucial, and this is something that we really need to cooperate with our ISPs, with the service providers that are doing the great job of getting to the end customers. And this is very visible on the market, that we need to push. We need to do whatever we can to make people need those 2, 5, and 8 gigs, even though you don't believe it right now, Simon, but I hope that we will meet in 5 years, and then you will be buying me a good champagne, hopefully. And also getting to your point that the CFOs and the Excels must be put in place. I believe through our experience, it is doable, because you don't have to, put the whole modernization at once everywhere. You can, plan for a longer time so that, the investment for the modernization or for upgrading the network becomes economically efficient and makes sense. By doing this in stages, in places where you have higher demand and you can have quicker returns. So I believe that the general statement that, this investment just doesn't put into my Excel. I think that everything can be done in a smart way. And we as the industry, we shouldn't be focusing on the obstacles, but rather pushing forward for more possibilities. And as you mentioned, the second homes, it's killing me that when I go, maybe not to my second home, but for holidays or wherever, and there's no good internet connection. Maybe it's because where I'm working at, but if the connection is terrible, this is just, not for me. And I hope that, more people will be needing this.
Yeah.
Just wait, I want to, Simon, just ask you as well for another perspective on this. So it's clear take-up can be an issue in some places, but also, we're in the UK today. It's clear that I don't think there's many investors stacked up outside the door to invest in new alternates in the UK. Can you talk about the investment climate today, where certain companies are, their funding rounds, the ones that maybe just didn't get the take-up? What is it like from an investor's perspective? What are you looking at? What are you seeing?
Look, let me start with a customer perspective, which is there's still plenty of parts of this country where the mobile coverage is still not great, and the only broadband you get is good old BT copper, basically, right? And I'm talking university towns, and places like that. So actually, fundamentally, these issues in the market have now resulted in the fact that the coverage that we were all talking about, as if there's 3 times overbuilt, in some places there is 0 overbuilt. There's still no fiber. So that's kind of in some ways a real challenge, I think, from the customer perspective. From our perspective today, look, if you look at the UK or the German markets, whatever you want to do, it's very difficult to be contrarian. If the lending community looks at this and is sitting and nursing, a lot of difficult cases, it means the only way to fund some of these things is through equity injections, and your investment committees obviously read newspapers as well. So, everyone kind of, unfortunately, in the same way, 7, 8 years ago, everybody was being asked, why don't you have a UK fiber investment in your portfolio? Now everybody's asking, why do you have a UK investment in your fiber portfolio, right? And UK is just one example, but, Germany has its own issues. Other markets will probably have their own issues as well. It'll roll. And the other problem, this is where the European market does exist, is that the investors and lenders are pretty much the same across the market. And a cold in one place causes a sneeze somewhere else, right? and they do spread rather quickly. And then it's very difficult to explain the niceties of the particular market that you're looking at to somebody who's burning somewhere else. These obviously become bigger issues. I think fundamentally what needs to happen is where there are purely balance sheet or sort of business model questions, they need to be worked out in the next year or two. Unfortunately, as I always say, people are involved, so it might take a bit longer. And you start again. I mean, it's almost like this sort of environment at the moment. It does mean the incumbents probably, in these distressed markets are having an easier time. Is that optimal for the market? Let's see. But I think it's going to be tricky.
Okay. Christian?
No, I would say nevertheless, and no surprise, as I represent an open access platform, obviously, but bringing as much traffic and attention to your network and also your technology via the ISPs. So you would elaborate on sales, having as many parties as possible on the network is the way forward. Yeah. And do you need help from regulatory authorities to this, or should you just go ahead? I think what we do in Germany is there's no regulation on our partners in Germany, so they do it on a volunteer basis, and they face the fact, okay, this is the best business case, and they will sacrifice their own brand to some extent, but figures shows, and we see it from several cases in the Danish market, that even activity on the traditional internal ISP also goes up because you bring a much more attention to the network and to the technology.
So I think going back to your point, Simon, sitting in the UK, they have Project Gigabit, and I live in, I work in the UK, I live in Ireland, back and forth. We have the National Broadband Scheme. I have fibre to the field. I have 1 gig into my field where I live, I have access to 60 ISPs. They go from the big Vodafone Skies down to the small ones. So they're going to finish their build by the end of about 2026. Mairead yesterday said about 37% take up in total. This is very rural areas, about 500,000 homes, but where they've been there for a while, it's about 60%. So that's a really fantastic story. There's no overbuild there. Look at the UK and Project Gigabit here. It's been a failure, I can say, because you've got areas that were awarded contracts, and then people who took those contracts are now handing them back. So if you live in those areas, it's great to know that the market town down has 4 overbuilds. You're getting nothing, And I think that's something that disparity, I think, in different markets and how they approach them. And state subsidies, they all have to play together, where in Ireland it's a full open access network. I mean, if anybody looks at the MBI case study, I think it's a really good, positive way. They had to invest, but everybody's treated the same, whether you're a large scale one or you're a small player, So I would be kind of interested to see how that, the UK and Germany play out, in terms of looking at those areas where the market hasn't functioned. And looking at, say, the incumbent, and say, is there more, from your perspective, Simon, is there more the regulators can do, or what is the?
I mean, undoubtedly, is it in anyone's interest that my road gets dug up 3 times to put 3 layers of fiber? From my perspective, I think the big step is, we have Orange here on the panel. When is Deutsche Telekom or BT actually going onto an AltNet's fiber network instead of building their own from a sort of society, cost of capital, all sorts of issues perspective? That's the way to go. And yet, as I always said before, people are involved, and therefore, there are certain strategic imperatives for the incumbents and for the challengers, and sometimes as well, where they will try and fight instead of trying to play along, and that's quite natural.
I mean, just my perspective of Orange from the outside, was a long time, is that Orange were an incumbent who now act like a modern altnet. They say you can't say the same about BT because they don't bring their ISP. The ISP are not actively buying off altnets. Same with Deutsche Telekom. But I mean, that can't be said of Orange, I think. And in other markets, you've bought the incumbent and they're acting like an altnet.
Yes. For example, in Poland, we created Orange Poland created a FiberCo, which developed the OpenNet model. I will come back to your example. Maybe Niall, regarding Ireland.
Yeah.
The key point that you said is public subsidies.
Yeah.
When you have public subsidies, you can have a business case. Without public subsidies, you can have issue. And currently in Orange, we are really capex to sales oriented. we mean if we put €1 in deployment, we need to have at least 1 or 2 anchor tenants. No anchor tenant, no deployment. So yeah, for example, I will talk about the Belgian market where we are not an incumbent. Yeah. We are the second or third player. For the rural coverage, today we have a memorandum of understanding with Proximus, and in this memorandum of understanding, we decided to have co-build. I mean, we share for the rural deployment of fiber. We share part of the areas to make sure to have a good economical deployment. And for the rest, the very expensive areas, we are looking for alternative technology because we know, and I'm not sure that 100% fiber coverage will be the target everywhere because in some areas it is very expensive. So there we need to have alternative technology, mobile, and maybe we can talk about satellite. Just one word. I think it's a great opportunity to create, a true European satellite ecosystem, because we will all leverage on this model. So, in Orange we try to work as much as possible with European players. Yeah. Sometimes we need to work with other players. But it's also an alternative technology in some specific areas and markets.
Yeah. I want to just, we're kind of coming towards the end now, but is there any kind of questions from the audience to the panel? Over here. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I don't know if there's a mic, if not, maybe Rob, you can just speak loudly. Oh, sure. Okay. So infrastructure sharing on, you mean physical, physical access sharing. Maybe I'll ask Martha. I mean,
physical access. You mean like the passive infrastructure, sharing of the passive infrastructure. So, from the perspective of open access wholesalers, we are focusing on the active services, and it makes sense that it's easier for our clients, for the ISP, to use this active service as they are then reselling it to and preparing the whole offer to their clients, to the end customers. So from economical point of view, we of course are sharing our infrastructure, but from the economical point of view for those ISPs, it doesn't make sense. So at least in Poland. Of course, if someone is, for example, building their own network and needs to use some part of our ducts and in general passive infrastructure, of course it's doable. But for the ISPs, for service providers that are, directly contacting their end customers, if they have the open access network that is having the network is knowing how to do it, have processes and everything, the active service as BSA is the most economical solution.
And maybe a complementary view to Martha. In France, the passive models was quite successful, but there was a reason behind because, the national ISP, they were already present everywhere, in every node of the network. So it was not so much costly for them to have a passive access. In other markets, you're right.
Like in Poland.
We need to have you can start with Bstream, then you switch to Vula, for example, if you want to lower your expenses on backhaul, and it can be step deployment. But you are totally right. The active model is the most.
That's what's beautiful in open access, and that's why we started talking about it, because from a different perspective, it's just the most natural and sustainable way of sharing the infrastructure with others without excessive expenses, using the environment and everything.
And I mean, Chris, I don't know, in Denmark, do you do?
For sure, the layer 2 access, I think it's it actually gives the opportunity for even smaller players to join like large-scale networks with fairly low investment. So
Yep.
for us, it's all about supporting low entry barriers for the service provider.
And do Denmark offer, do they do passive layer 1? I know they do in
You
Sweden.
can have passive access in the incumbents network, but the rest of the, in particular utility companies, I was part of that discussions with the NRAs some years ago, and the whole point was if we only gave in on passive infrastructure, we would strengthen the incumbent itself because they were one of the few who could actually reach the whole country. So we fought a lot to maintain the acceptance of a layer 2 access. And in the end, you see like a full picture of service providers, small and big, and yeah, lower entry barriers. That was what it was all about. And besides that, it's also a more efficient way of running access instead of building several active layers next to each other.
And Simon, from an investor perspective, if you're investing, do you care whether it's layer 1 or sharing or active layer sharing?
Again, from our perspective, what we're trying to figure out is, are we investing into competitive telecoms or are we investing into infrastructure?
So
and of course, we are interested where there is not an opportunity for easy overbuild or easy access with someone else. And then, if open access makes sense, by all means, from our perspective, that is good. What we don't want to do is to be the front runners in such an exercise and then try and convince the big ISPs in the market to come to us, and in that sense, I guess, Marta, your company is a good example. You have your sister ISP, so to speak, which is driving that take-up. And something that, for example, in France, in the wholesale structures that we have, we don't have our own ISP there. And there you really are depending on, Orange and others to fight it out amongst themselves. And we see very clearly there are months when they don't do it and it all slows down, and there are months when they do it, and you have zero control over that dynamic. So we're somewhat agnostic as long as we see that moat on the competition side.
Maybe time for one last question, if anyone else has it. Okay. Other than that, I will thank my panelists.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you, the audience, for your time. Thank you.